Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Building Your Career podcast. Today, I'm joined by James Vevers, who's head of Preconstruction at Coniston Limited, and works very closely with a previous guest that we had in Dino as well. So, James, I'll start off where we always start off because you tell us a little bit more about your current job role and the business that you work for as well.
Of course. Hi, Dom. So as you say, I'm head of pre-construction at Coniston. So that's a role that entails everything from dealing with a simple lead, whether it comes from a phone call, email, a text, or WhatsApp, through to getting a tender delivered, organising pre-tender interviews, getting contracts signed, and then an ongoing client retention relationship. So making sure that we are delivering on what we promised to deliver at tender stage. So it's a fairly whole life cycle process. My interest in keeping clients happy during the build process is obvious because we want to pull the next tender out of them, or even end up negotiating a job. So that's the sort of the crux of my role. So it's quite far-reaching. I run a team of 6 in-house people and multiple sort of external resources doing different parts of design and submissions and stuff like that. The company that I work for, Coniston, so I've been here for 4.5 years. We are a restoration, conservation, refurbishment contractor based in the southeast. We've got 2 offices, one here in Dartford, another one down in Canterbury. The Dartford office is what we refer to as the London office. We're on the periphery of London. We deliver all the London central work from here. Canterbury, although we're both offices being in Kent, is very much seen as the Kent office, and that picks up work down in sort of the deeper Kent regions, so Canterbury, Ashford, the Dover, places like that. And we have slowly but surely carved away out as a sort of one of the leading restoration contractors in London, certainly principal contractors. There are a number of small specialist contractors like stonemasonry businesses, but there aren't that many that do the whole process, and that's certainly what Coniston do. So it's a nice part of the building sector, nice part of the industry. We get to work on some astonishingly nice places. We're very lucky, very privileged. So yeah, and it's a nice space to be in.
Okay, brilliant. And could you just kind of elaborate a little bit? Because I know a lot of our listeners, particularly the audio listeners, have asked, on the earlier stages, what the tender process means, because it's something that they keep hearing time and time
Mm.
again in terms of tender process, tender process. But could you, from your perspective, just elaborate on exactly what the tender process is in construction?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So everything starts with a lead. So lead can be, as I've said earlier, generated by a phone call from an architect that we work with saying we've got this project coming up, or it can be coming through a more official source such as a government portal telling you about a particular project that's coming up. Uh, Typically, you then respond to that lead in a formal way. There are a number of different acronyms, PQQs, SQs, EOIs, but essentially you are confirming your interest and telling them why you think you're suitable to be chosen to go on to a tender list. Generally, a tender list is a short list of potential providers of that work service. We as a business try to stick to a tender list of about 4 people. There are tender lists that expand way beyond that. For obvious reasons, your chance of success lessens for every person you add onto that list. So as a business, we target fairly small tender list opportunities. There are things in government world called open tenders. An open tender actually means that anybody can go for it, and it really just is such a wide open sort of playing field that they have expressions of interest from all over the world, certainly from all over the UK, from people that want to offer mastic pointing through to people like us that can deliver the whole service. So slowly but surely, we've sort of driven down into the detail of what we want to do. So assuming we've made a tender list, we'll get a notification from often a quantity surveyor, client side quantity surveyor saying you're on the list, you're getting this tender on this date. The tender arrives at a date which isn't the date they've given you. That tender turns up. It will come via a portal. You get an email saying you've been chosen for this tender. Click on this link. It might come via an email. Old school, it might even turn up in the post, but I've not seen one of those for 5 years, so it's pretty unlikely. And then really, a tendering process is a combination of us as a contractor telling the client how much we think the work they want to do is going to cost them, um, how long we think it's going to take to deliver, giving them the team that we want to put forward to deliver that work for them, and then often a whole load of sort of softer issues around managing your supply chain, sustainability, engagement things. So the whole different worlds. Some clients really their interest is purely cost driven. They need to deliver a project to make their budgets work. It's got to be cost. Other clients have very different, like they may wish you to employ 3 or 4 apprentices, and that's their measure of success. It may be a job of the very highest quality, and that's all that matters. It may be, as is often the case, it has to be delivered by this date. You can tell me whatever you want, but if you can't do it on this date, then your offer to us is of no interest. So there's our job, my job, is to establish what those drivers are, what the client wants, and then to respond to that and hopefully meet their requirements. We then submit a tender. So a tender has always a deadline, an absolute deadline, can't be moved. It's often noon. It's often noon on a Friday. Don't know why, but it's often noon on a Friday. So we have a team of people through estimators, planners, project managers, bid submissions, graphic designers, bid writers, working together to pull that tender together in generally a 4 to 6 week tender period, pull it together, submit the tender. We then breathe a huge sigh of relief, and then we wait to hear what the outcome may be. And then typically what would happen, Dom, is we would then get a series of post tender questions, and then if we are in the preferred group of tenderers, then we'll be called to a post tender interview. So the whole tendering process, in my world, where I look at a lead through to a post tender interview, that could be 18 months. The actual tender period is, like I say, 4 to 6 weeks of that. But there's a lot of stuff before and after that goes on. So yeah, it's a whole mixture of pricing, quality, a lot of presentational skills. It brings it sort of in a short period of time encapsulates everything we do in construction in one massive head rush, and you get a tender in front of people.
And for some of the people that have messaged in, it's such a varied kind of role as well, because no two things are ever going to be the same in terms of tenders.
Absolutely.
Because the clients have got different needs, they've got different what they see as different outcomes in the project. So yeah, it's not just a copy and paste job every single time. Each job is completely bespoke and different kind of variations in how you approach it as well.
Absolutely right. Yep. So the worst thing you can do in tendering is copy, cut, and paste. That
Yeah.
shows through straight away that you're not really offering a bespoke solution for their bespoke products, and it cheapens the offering that you're making or you're providing for people. So critically, there's a time needs to be given to proofread things, make sure that actually what you are offering, firstly. As I've described, you've perhaps got 5 or 6 different people working on a bid. You've got to make sure that actually what those 5, 6 people are producing, writing, it all flows seamlessly through one document. So you need to take the time to make sure that actually when the tender lands, the client picks it up. One, you've answered their questions, a bit like sitting an exam, doing a dissertation, whatever it is. You're asked a series of questions. You've got to make sure you answer them in a clear format, in an easy way for them to mark them and go, yeah, they've answered that question. You're already in their good books because you said, here's your question, here's my answer. And so you're guiding them into your tender, introduce them into your tender, and then the whole thing, as I said, it just needs to be one seamless process. It needs to be bespoke. It needs to be very much tailored to meet their requirements. So as a business, we are very selective about what we tender for. We need to make sure firstly we think we can win it, obviously,
Hmm.
that we can deliver it for them, and that actually when we get to that critical bidding period, we've got the time within the team to actually put the resource into it to make sure that we hit all of those measures for them. I need to be top two on every tender really to make sure that I feel that we've done our jobs properly. It often isn't top two on price, so I need to make sure that our quality, our people part is so strong that actually there might be a compelling reason why you don't choose the lowest tenderer.
Okay. Well, that's a really in depth, and thank you for kind of breaking that down in kind of very simple terms as well, easy for everyone to understand. But if we could kind of go back to the beginning of your career,
Mm.
then what inspired you to pursue a career in instruction, and how did you personally get started?
Okay, so I could give you the I was inspired sort of weepy eye story, or I could give you the story where I finished my A levels and thought, this is fun. I don't have to work for a while, and then I had pressure from parents who said you need to get a job. So I'll go with the honest version.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was finished school, kicking around, went travelling with mates, came back, and then parents said you really do need to work. I found a job in a local paper. I'm from sort of southeast London, local paper for a buyer within a construction company. Didn't really understand what the two words meant, but didn't know how they went together. So I thought I'd go along for the interview. Walked in, got offered the job, started doing it. Found it interesting immediately. I subliminally, so my father was a quantity surveyor, client side quantity surveyor. We spent a lot of time, me and my brother as kids, going around National Trust properties, English heritage properties. So somewhere in there was this woven like for older buildings. Just through pure fluke, the company I started to work for predominantly worked on older buildings. The first project I worked on was a National Trust property called Iton Moat down in Kent. Found it
Hmm.
utterly fascinating, I have to say,
Hmm.
and just kind of stuck with it. That company was part of the Kia Group. They
Hmm.
offered an excellent, back in the day, and still do, an excellent sort of path for new starters. So I didn't go in with a degree. I went in just with A levels, and they had a sort of a clear management trainee management structure to work through, where you work through all departments, and that gave me just a chance to see all the different facets of construction. And that's one of the most important takeaways I would give, is that whatever you go into in construction, find out about the other bits as well, because there are so many parts to it. Whether you're an estimator, a surveyor, you work on site, you work within the accounts team, the marketing team. There are so many bits to construction, and that applies whether you're a small company where you might do a number of those bits, or a big company where you just do one of those bits and you work in a team just
Yeah.
doing one of those bits. But there are so many bits to it, and so the Kia life gave me an excellent feel for all the bits that you could do, and ultimately kind of led me to the bit that I found that I enjoyed the most, and therefore I would be best at doing.
Oh, that's quite a common theme as well in this podcast is just kind of keep your options open at
Mm.
the beginning and try and get as much exposure as possible to all the different bits because one of the episodes was kind of shattering construction myths and one of them was it's not just about the finished product and the building side. There was so much more that goes in on that than just people on site actually building
Yeah.
it. So yeah, it's a great kind of point there. So if you could give yourself one bit of
Mm.
advice, if you could turn back the hands of
Mm.
time and give yourself one piece of advice when you first started off and give that to your younger self, what advice would you give?
I think the biggest thing I wish I had been is a bit bolder and a bit braver a bit sooner. So
Hmm.
whilst Kiers was a fantastic training ground, I think I probably spent a bit too long in each thing finding my way, and actually I could have probably got to where I am, not necessarily, the position, but the headspace sooner. I actually thought that's the
Hmm.
bit that I enjoy doing. So I was with them for a lot. So I'm not for 1 second telling people just to jump around from job to job, but I think
Yeah.
I probably spent a little bit too long in my first job, not necessarily in the same company. I could have moved jobs within the company. You don't have to leave the company, but I think I just spent a little
Yeah.
bit too long sort of learning the whole buying process before I really got to think buying's not the best bit for me. And that's probably what I would say. So it's that, be a bit bolder, be a bit more confident. Stick your neck out a bit and just see where it takes you. Because the opportunities within construction are so wide. You touched on it. Yes, it's about building things, but actually, for me, it's about people. It's all about people. So learning about people, people skills, team management, how to get the best out of a team, those kind of skills, those softer skills, are as critical to succeed in construction as being able to build something. I've actually learned, to be honest with you, there are always people technically that can build stuff, but there are so many bits around that person that can technically build that need to be there to make a successful construction business. You actually can you don't necessarily have to be the most technical person in the room, because the most technical person in the room won't have the skills that you may have around other issues. So it's just understanding your skills and where you can best be used.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes back to a very early episode that we had with John Elliott, who just said an inquisitive mindset is key,
Mm,
really. Just ask those questions, be inquisitive,
yeah,
learn how other people do things. And as you well said there, play to your own strengths.
yeah,
You know, if you're more of a personal bubble people and you want to go to the management side of things, then you can ask the questions on the managerial side and steer the your career path in that direction. But as you well said, pick that out at an
yeah.
early stage rather than kind of maybe just staying and trying to learn something when maybe it's not because there's so many different options available to you. If you feel as though something's not for you, then just steer your career in a different trajectory. It's fairly easily done.
Absolutely right, and feel confident to actually sort of stand up and say, you know what, this maybe isn't right for me, but I really think I should try this. I think I'd be good at this, and give it a go. And also, once you get to that position where you are leading a team or managing people, to recognise that and take the time to actually see within other people kind of where their strengths are, and encourage them, rather than, I think as an industry we're a bit inclined to push people into roles that they're not comfortable in, but we should be doing the opposite. We should actually be encouraging them into roles that they are comfortable in, where they excel. Rather,
Yeah.
I think it's all too often that people are, well, you should be doing this now. Like, well, I don't want to be doing that, but people get pushed into it. And I'm sure that's not unique to construction, but I know construction and nothing else. But it's just learning that more about people, and if people are happy and passionate, enthusiastic, they generally perform very well. Yourself or others.
Yeah, it's learning about, and that was one of our previous guests. It's what motivates
Mm,
people, what drives people, what's people's why.
yeah.
Why do they
Yes.
come to work every
Absolutely.
day? And as a manager, if you find that out from an early stage, then you can tailor their career path a lot
Mm,
better than just forcing a square peg into a round hole,
absolutely right,
really.
Dom.
So yeah,
Yeah.
excellent point. Excellent point. So in your opinion, then, how important is the education and qualification route, or is there different routes available to people who, for whatever reason, may not be able to afford going down the university route, or can't go into university for other various reasons? What are the options available for people in this day
I
and
mean,
age?
there are many options available. I mean, there is a tendency, and even as a SME, we have this tendency to choose the professions from a graduate background. And I can see that is becoming the norm, most definitely. But it's not the only way in. There are routes sort of through apprenticeships that allow people to actually come in and get their degree, but get sponsored through a business. There are larger construction companies out there that actually are very strong at doing that. I guess a little bit like my Kia story. They paid for me to do a day release back in the day, do an HNC, HND, IOB, all those things. That was covered by my company. It was hard work. Don't get me wrong. I was working and I was doing a day release, working in evenings to try and get it all done. But it pays off,
Mhm.
and someone else is paying for it ultimately. So why wouldn't you? So that's still
Yeah.
available to people. I think the bit that we miss, and where the massive skill shortage is in the trades route, and I think it's encouraging people to look at a building site in a different way. I think there's not an attraction. I think if people have come from a family where their mother, father, brother, sister may work in construction on a building site, they actually know what it's like. They're quite happy. But I think
Yeah.
to someone who might think it as a new place they're not familiar with, it's very daunting. And I think there's an image that a construction hasn't shaken of a construction site being an unfriendly environment. And as an industry, we need to break that. I do a little bit of mentoring at a local academy school down where I live, and nobody in that space is interested in working in construction. The guy that I
Hmm.
directly mentor, in fact, his father works in construction. It's the last thing he would ever want to do because his father works on site, and
Hmm.
he just didn't appreciate. I think, like I've spoken to you about, the multitude of roles available in construction until we sat down and we spoke. And then he was like, "Okay, so I wouldn't have to be on site every day, or I wouldn't have to. I could basically go to uni, do a marketing degree, and then I could actually come and work in construction. Yeah, absolutely. I could do do a psychology degree and come and work in HR in construction. And it's all those things, and people are like, okay, fine, because as you know, construction is a massive employer, and actually it's not a bad industry to be in. There are lots of employers. There are lots of jobs. It's fairly well paid. It's competitively paid for lots of other sectors. It's better paid. It's actually quite an enjoyable space to work in. Yeah, we graft, but actually there's definitely a work-life balance in construction. People will go to the pub in the evening and let off a bit of steam in construction. That's what people do. So it's not all just working on a building site, fitting bits of timber together or laying bricks and stuff like that. But it's kind of breaking that myth of making it more attractive to people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Out of interest, if you could just expand on that with that kind of mentorship, is there any kind of common themes or common myths that people have, and how do we overcome that? Obviously, the being purely based on site is one of them, but is there anything that comes up time and time again?
I think that there is there's still a very much a divide between sort of it's all boys in construction. I wouldn't want to be working in that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
father to two sort of 22-year-old girls, and my youngest has sort of expressed an interest of being in the industry, but certainly not being in construction. She would like to work for an interior
Mm-hmm.
designer or work for a property
Mm-hmm.
company. And her perception
Mm-hmm.
is very much that it's just all blokes on site and it's a very blokey environment. So that even in our small business, that's just not the case. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's the perception. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
breaking that down for people. What I've learned through my mentorship thing as well is actually there's nothing in a young person's space that makes construction look like an attractive thing. So there are no influencers on Instagram that work in construction that they're following. That's not their world.
Yeah.
It's not their space. So I don't feel
Yeah.
that we're not selling ourselves to a generation or a number of generations, and we need to change that up most massively because you walk into there and not one person would say, "I want to work in construction." A lot of them don't know what they
Yeah.
want to do, but they do know they don't want to do construction.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, this is what both yourself and myself are trying to do is trying to dispel some of
Mm,
those myths and just tell the
yeah,
truth really about what the construction industry is like. It's not what it was like back in the 70s and 80s anymore. Things have modernized, things have changed and moved on. So,
absolutely.
and that leads really nicely onto our final question as well. In terms of, and this is aimed at more of our kind of more senior management listeners, but what can people at the top or what can companies do to kind of both attract and retain young talent in this day and age, or not necessarily young talent, or people maybe who are looking at a career change, maybe they're kind of in their 30s or 40s and looking just for a little bit of a career change. What can we do at senior management level to get those people on board?
I think that we need to, we're very set in our ways, and we need to step outside of that. We need to be more modern, be in line with current thinking. We need to be able to actually make that work-life balance correct for people. We need to make sure that people can actually have their lives and work in construction and get that balance correct. And I don't think we do enough for that really. I think we still have an expectation that people need to be in the office, need to have bums on seats, and that's really not what people need to be doing anymore. So I think it's just modernising the whole industry and approach to employing people. That's probably the best thing we can do.
Okay, brilliant. And yeah, I think I completely agree with you there as well. Is that it is all just about getting the word out there, but it's all about the senior management taking responsibility and ownership of. Yeah, we all know it's an issue, but let's do something about it and let's act on it now before it's too late. Because with the CIOB producing a report recently saying we need 250,000 more people in the UK construction industry by 2027, the time's ticking already. So let's act, let's do something now, and let's implement change from today. Very
Lovely to meet you,
much
Dom.
for
Thanks for having me. Speak again. Goodbye.
brilliant. Thank you very much for being a guest, James, and it was absolutely wonderful to have you on board.